All right, let's jump right in. We're going to unpack just one single chapter from the book of Genesis, chapter 23. Now, on the surface, it seems like a pretty straightforward, kind of somber story about a man buying a burial plot for his wife. But, buried inside this ancient real estate deal are all these incredible layers of legal drama, a historical mystery that stumped scholars for centuries, and the very first tangible step in a promise that would literally shape the world.
You've got to picture this. The story opens at this moment of just profound vulnerability. Abraham, a man who's been promised this entire land by God, is heartbroken. His wife Sarah has just died, and he owns nothing, not a single square foot of ground to bury her. So his plea to the local Hittites, well, it's not just some formal request, it's the raw, honest cry of a grieving husband and a foreigner, just looking for a final permanent resting place for his wife.
And that's really the big question that drives this whole chapter, isn't it? This isn't just about finding a grave. It's about how Abraham, this resident alien, can establish a permanent, totally legal foothold in a land that he's been promised but doesn't actually possess yet. The way he does it, well, it turns out to be a masterclass in ancient law and just unwavering faith.
Okay, so here's the setup. Sarah has died in Canaan. This is the exact land that God promised to Abraham and all his descendants. But here's the catch, right? That promise, it's for the future. In the here and now, Abraham is effectively a stranger in a strange land. He has no property, and he has this urgent, pressing need to find a proper, permanent place to bury Sarah. And he knows he has to do it the right way.
And that leads us right into the negotiation itself. Abraham goes to the local Hittites at the city gate, which back then was the center of all public and legal life. What happens next sounds like this incredibly polite, super generous conversation. But as we're about to see, it's actually a highly sophisticated and strategic dance, deeply rooted in the customs of the time.
So check out the contrast here, it's fascinating. Ephron, the guy who owns the land, makes this grand public gesture. No, I give you the field, I give you the cave. I mean, it sounds unbelievably generous, but Abraham, he immediately pushes back. He rejects the gift and insists, no, I will pay the full price. So you gotta ask yourself, why on earth would he turn down a free plot of land?
Well, the short answer is it wasn't really a gift at all. This was a classic move, a perfect example of what's known as polite bargaining. You see, Ephron's public gift was actually this really savvy negotiating tactic. It was designed to force Abraham to name an impossibly high price himself. By offering it for free, he puts all this social pressure on Abraham to offer a sum so large it can't be refused, and it all happens without the unseemliness of actually haggling.
And the price they land on? 400 shekels of silver. I mean, to put that in perspective, this was an astronomical sum of money. Some scholars have literally called it a king's ransom for what was just a small field in a cave. And yet, Abraham doesn't blink, he doesn't hesitate for a second. He immediately weighs out the silver, making the deal official right then and there.
And this is why it's so important. Abraham wasn't being foolish, he was being absolutely brilliant. By paying that crazy high price, he wasn't just buying a piece of land. No, he was acquiring a legally binding, permanent deed with zero strings attached. See, a gift could be taken back, or it might come with all these future obligations. But a public sale, witnessed by everyone at the city gate, that was forever. He was securing a claim that no one could ever challenge.
So let's peel back another layer of this story, because this isn't just a legal drama. It's also a historical detective story. For a very, very long time, the very people Abraham was dealing with, the Hittites, posed a huge problem for historians and biblical critics.
So here was the deal. The Bible mentions the Hittites dozens of times, placing them right there in Canaan during Abraham's lifetime. But for centuries, there was absolutely nothing, no archaeological or historical evidence outside the Bible that the Hittite people even existed back then. So, naturally, critics pointed to this as proof that the Bible was historically unreliable, just a book of myths. You see, the great Hittite empire that archaeologists knew about, it was centered in what's now modern-day Turkey, and it thrived hundreds of years after Abraham lived. So this created a huge gap, more than 400 years, leading critics to argue that the author of Genesis just made a mistake, anachronistically inserting a later people into an earlier story. And then, in 1906, everything gets turned on its head. An archaeologist named Hugo Winkler is digging at a site in Turkey, and he uncovers the massive, long-lost capital of the Hittite Empire, Hattusha. I'm talking palaces, temples, and a royal archive with over 10,000 clay tablets detailing their laws, their treaties, their entire history. All of a sudden, the mythical Hittites were very, very real.
But here's the really amazing part. The discoveries didn't just prove the Hittites existed. They revealed that the account in Genesis 23 wasn't just plausible. It was remarkably, specifically accurate. It reflected these specific legal customs that had been totally lost to history for thousands of years. I mean, just look at this connection. It's a perfect match. The Hittite law tablets they found at Hattusha confirmed the very legal procedures described in Genesis. A public transaction at the city gate? Yep, required by Hittite law. The super detailed description of the property, the field, the cave, even the trees, that was a standard part of Hittite contracts to prevent any future fights. Payment in weighed silver? Standard practice. The Genesis account fit the Hittite legal framework like a glove.
So, okay, we've got the brilliant legal strategy, and we've got the stunning historical proof. But that brings us to the final and maybe the most important layer of all, the theological significance. Because this whole transaction was about so much more than just burying Sarah. It was about making God's promise physical.
And this right here, this quote just nails it. For his entire life, the promise of the land had been just that, a promise, right? An intangible word from God. But with this deed, for the very first time, that promise became tangible. It became a piece of legally owned, documented real estate. You could say it was the down payment on the future inheritance of an entire nation.
And that one little plot of land, it becomes this anchor for the entire family, for generations to come. After Sarah, Abraham himself was buried there. Then their son Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried there. And then their grandson Jacob and his wife Leah. That cave, the cave of Machpelah, it became a multi-generational testament in stone, a physical claim on the land that reminded each new generation of the promise God had made.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, we're left with this: a story that starts with grief becomes a story of incredible hope. A simple legal negotiation becomes a major historical vindication, and a single gravesite purchased in an act of faithful obedience becomes the very first title deed to a homeland for millions. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often is the entire course of history set in motion by one small, faithful step into the unknown?